We're here with Brian Barnhart. Tell me a little about yourself, Brian.
Well, I grew up in Tolono, Illinois, which is just south of Champaign. Used to be go to all the games when I was a kid. A lot of basketball games. In fact, not far from where we're sitting right now. I used to sit with my dad. We would rotate with my brothers and sister as to who got to go, and I was the oldest, so I picked the games I wanted to see. I had first choice, and so I'd go to a lot of Illinois basketball games. Of course, we go to some football games, not as many because that was in the middle of the harvest season, so that was always a little trickier. But no, went to Unity High School, eventually wound up at Liberty University, and then started my career there in Lynchburg, and here we are all these years later in Champaign. Well, I went to Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, which was, it's a much bigger school now. When I was there, it was very small. It was only about 10 years old, had 2,000 or 3,000 students, and it was good for me because I was a history major starting out in college and didn't necessarily know I wanted to get into broadcasting, but it was fortunate because in the sense that there was a radio station there, a campus radio station, and so just about anybody that wanted to get on the air could get on the air. It wasn't like at Syracuse where you literally have to compete to get on the air, or you have to take your turn when you get it. So I had a chance to jump on the radio station. I fell in love with radio and doing radio, and I knew that's what I wanted to do rather than teach history. I still love history. I love to read about it, love to talk about it, but it turned out to be a good move. Got started in broadcasting in college. I started doing some work for the campus radio station at Liberty Baptist College, as it was known then, Liberty University. And so I wound up doing some of the games there, the women's basketball games on that station. Did some local cable television. This was in the early days of cable TV. We have so many more channels now, but we thought cable TV was the end all of everything because there were so many channels. We used to have three or four, and that's going to age me quite a bit, but to have the chance to be on cable TV doing some games in Lynchburg, wound up doing some games for the Lynchburg Mets, which was the New York Mets single A team, and my career kind of started in Lynchburg and went from there.
How did you become the Illini broadcaster?
Well, it's kind of a long story. It was when I was away at college, and then I started my minor league baseball career, and I worked in Salem, Virginia, and Lynchburg, Virginia, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and wound up in Anaheim, California, doing the now Los Angeles Angels. They were the Anaheim Angels back then in the late 90s, and had a couple of really good teams those 2 years. And then my contract wasn't renewed, so I decided to come back home. I thought, well, I'll maybe pursue a job at WDWS in Champaign. I had another job offer in Montreal, Canada that fell through with the Montreal Expos, and now they're the Washington Nationals, of course. And so I came back home and I started working at WDWS, and then eventually the University of Illinois reached out to me and said, hey, our guy that's been doing the games for many years, Jim Turpin, is about to retire, and we'd be interested in you being our new voice of the Illini. And I thought, well, this would be an awesome job to have. I'd always thought I'd be interested in it, but I didn't think I'd ever be back in Champaign. When I went to the major leagues, to the Angels, I thought I was going to be doing the Angels games for the next 30 years, and turned out to be 2. And as it turned out, I've been here almost 20 years now, back in Champaign, back doing the Illini. So it was a real blessing to be back in town, to be around when they had an opening. They asked me about it. Obviously, I said yes. And here we are 20 years later.
What intrigued you so much to become a broadcaster?
Well, the funny thing is, as a young man growing up on a farm west of Tolono, I was quite a social introvert. I really didn't interact with a lot of people. I was a big reader. I read, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of history. I kind of kept to myself. I got good grades. I didn't like to interact with people very much. And that's what's ironic about the career that I wound up doing, was because now I talk to people every day in Champaign, 2 hours a day on the radio on Penny for Your Thoughts. I do these games, and I think what intrigued me, though, at the beginning was that because I was such an introvert, I could actually do something and not be seen doing it. People would say, well, did you want to get into TV? And I was like, no, not really. I don't want to be seen. I didn't like my appearance. I didn't like the way, I sounded on television, the way I looked on TV, and I got into the radio side of it, and I loved it because I could be all alone in a studio. I could dress how I wanted. I could look the way I wanted. I didn't have to comb my hair if I didn't need to. I could just show up, and be there. And that's what appealed to me, is I could do something. And then I gained confidence from it because people then started hearing me, and they say, hey, you do a pretty good job at that. And so then that gave me confidence to try it some more, to try to get better. And as time went on, I did some more TV as time went on. I wound up doing some work for the Big Ten Network in their early days and doing TV. So I've had it, the experience of being on television, but the radio has just always appealed to me no matter what, because it's such an intimate medium. It's you and me, it's in your car, it's in your house, it's in your headset, and I can basically be my own boss on the radio. Well, there's not a lot of obstacles in the sense of, the sports information people are very helpful. They give you the information you need. I think the biggest thing is just as I get older is the travel. You get in late at night. Now, we had a 6 o'clock game the other night in Iowa, and those are perfect because you have a 6 o'clock game, you fly back from Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, you get home at 10 or 11 o'clock, and that's pretty normal. But if you have a 9 o'clock Eastern time tip-off at Penn State on a Wednesday night, you're going to get back home at 1 or 2 in the morning. And so it just, a lot of people, when you listen or watch an Illinois game on TV or radio, the game's over, they win or lose, hopefully they win, but you turn off the TV and you go to bed. Well, the team's just getting the process started of coming back home. They've got to go through security and they've got to get their plane, and it's an hour and a half or 2 depending on the length of the flight. And so you get back home, and then I don't know how these young men, they can handle it, but they've got to go back to school the next day and do all of that. For me, getting older, that always takes me a day or two to recover from a late night like that. So that's the biggest thing, is just the travel, I think. While it is very accommodating, charter flights most of the time, it can wear on you after a while. Well, I think about my professors in college, the gentleman that hired me out at Liberty University to work not just on the campus station, but also the church had a station there too that carried the Liberty University Flames games, and his name was Jerry Edwards. He was huge in my life, giving me a chance, taking a chance on this really shy farm kid who wasn't sure of himself, and giving him an opportunity and helping me learn about the basics of broadcasting. So I would say one. Jim Turpin was a big influence on me as I was growing up, listening to him doing the games, and Lauren Tate and those guys. And I never dreamed growing up that I'd actually be friends with Jim Turpin and work with Lauren Tate on a regular basis and fill in for Jim Turpin on A Penny for Your Thoughts in Champaign. I would have never dreamed that. So those guys have been instrumental. And there was a gentleman with the Texas Rangers who has since passed away, Mark Holtz, was the voice of the Texas Rangers. And when I was in Oklahoma City, their AAA affiliate, I would send him material to listen to. And he gave me a lot of great feedback on, here's a couple of things to think about. And he said, he's very, very encouraging and very helpful to me from a baseball standpoint. And of course, eventually I wound up interviewing with the Texas Rangers. I didn't get a job, but did wind up in Anaheim about a year later. So he was very instrumental too, I think.
What has been your favorite moment being a broadcaster at Illinois so far?
Well, people ask me that frequently. There have been a lot of great ones. The Tyler Griffey layup to beat number 1 Indiana. Growing up, I mentioned going to the games here. I love to beat Indiana. It's always fun to beat those guys. And when they were number 1 and they came in here and Tyler Griffey hit that last-second layup, I'll just never forget that. But probably there's been a couple of big football wins. Ohio State back in '07, the Rose Bowl, calling a Rose Bowl, calling the Final Four, obviously, and the national championship game was a lot of fun. But I would say, the Arizona game, and it's ironic we're talking here before the Arizona game here, because you think about it, the Arizona series has been really spicy, to say the least. Lute Olson and Lucas Johnson, I can remember those battles, and we played them 3 times in 2000 and 2001, and played them in the Elite Eight, and half our team fouled out, and a lot of Illini fans have always remembered that. And then, of course, but the great finish in '05 in Chicago at the All-State Arena, the loudest arena I've ever been in my life, and just being down by 15, 4 minutes to go, and the fact that I'm thinking, what am I going to say to Illini Nation after this? The unbelievable year we've had, the 29-0 start, number 1 all season, and then suddenly we start hitting some baskets, and Luther hits a basket, and D. Brown hits a basket, and then we get a steal, and then we get an inbound steal, and the next thing you know, Darren's hitting his shot the famous shot to tie it at 80, and then we go overtime with Arizona, and just the the unbelievable emotion. I can still see Bruce Weber hugging his the assistant to him, just in a big bear hug and just weeping as they made it to the Final Four. So I would say the Arizona game, probably the Elite Eight game in '05, probably the crowning moment I've had so far. Now, there have been several to laugh about that we've had over the years. I think probably the funniest moment was, for me, was when Jerry Hester first started doing the ball games with me, and he had not done color with me before. And we get to the first time out of the first game, and he's really revved up. Like, this is so exciting. We're courtside, the crowd's going nuts. There's 16,000, and he takes off the headset, and he says, "They're paying you to do this?" He goes, "I can't believe it." He goes, "This is unbelievably fun." And I just started laughing because I'm like, well, don't tell him that. Just just keep doing it, and we're just going to have a great time together. So I think that was the moment I realized how special and what a blessing it is to be able to sit courtside, be so close to the coaches and the team, and feel that emotion in a big arena and a big game. But just his reaction to it was almost like a kid. He was like, "I can't believe they pay us to do this." And that's the way I've always felt about it.
So what's it like working with Dion Thomas?
Well, first of all, Dion is recognizable anywhere. I mean, people know that, his name is on the banner in the rafters. Everybody knows he's the all-time leading scorer. He is just a teddy bear of a man. He is so kind and so pleasant to everybody. Doesn't matter if he's met you 50 times or for the first time. And so that's, first of all, he's just a wonderful person. He's like a brother to me, a big brother to me. But also, I think the thing that he brings is he's been a player. He's played at a high level. He's played professionally overseas. The big thing is he's also coached. And when we were looking for someone eventually to replace Jerry Hester in the booth, first name I thought of was Dion, if he was available, was because he's been on the coaching side, and he's also been, I think, even an athletic director a little bit, and directed athletics and been a player. And I think he could bring that perspective to us and understands the game. And being able, and radio is a little trickier, as you know. TV, the analyst can talk over a lot of things. On radio, you've got to, as an analyst, you've got to jump in, say what you're going to say, and get out of the play-by-play guy's way. And that takes a little bit of practice. And he picked up on it really quickly, and he explains the game really well.
What is the Illinois football team like under Coach Bielema?
Well, Coach Bielema is probably one of the most 2 steps ahead of everybody else guy I've ever seen. He is thinking of things that most of us aren't thinking of at the moment. He's always a couple of moves ahead. He'd be a great checkers or chess player in that sense. He's got a great personality. He's been great to work with. He understands the game. He understands, all coaches know the game, but I think he understands the dynamics of what at Illinois. He was a pig farmer in northwestern Illinois. He understands the Big Ten. He's played for Hayden Fry. He's worked for Fry. He's worked for Ferentz. He's worked for Bill Snyder at K-State. He's worked for Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin. So he understands the Big Ten, and he understands the Big Ten West. And he's a perfect fit, I think. He's, as you could tell by all the players that came back who had been in the transfer portal and came back last year, he's just a really good one-on-one person. And he understands recruiting the state of Illinois is key. I like where it's headed. I think we've got the right guy coaching Illinois football.
So the memorable shot for Eddie Johnson, I should say, the memorable shot against Michigan State. What did that mean to you, watching that?
Well, as a fan, I would have been about 12 or 13, and I was with my dad up here in the north end zone just off the basket, and I can still, to this day, hear the roar of the crowd after Eddie Johnson hit that shot, and to beat Magic Johnson and Kelser and that crew from Michigan State that went on to win the national title, and Illinois, I think, got to 15-0 that year with the win. Eventually had some injuries and didn't play as well down the stretch, but that game, I was already a Illini fan, but that's a memory all these years later that I can still think of, which I'm the broadcaster for the team, but I'm also a fan, and that's a moment that really solidified me as an Illini fan, was Eddie Johnson's shot to beat Michigan State that night. It was cold. It was cold outside, but it was hot inside. My wife will come on occasion. My daughters will come when they get a chance. But for the most part, if they're doing some other things, I've got either friends or family that can use the tickets that I have to enjoy the game. But For the most part, you know, my kids mostly are all college age now, so they're off doing other things. Well, my kids are all pretty much either senior in high school on up into college, and so they don't get to come to a lot of games. I used to take my daughters when they were little to the women's games in particular, and I know they would come to some of the men's games when they were able to get tickets. So they're Illini fans like I am, but they obviously have their own world they're in now, being in college. So we don't see them here as much as we used to.
So what are your thoughts on the Illinois basketball team under Coach Underwood?
Well, Brad's done a great job. I think he and Bret Bielema are a lot alike. They're A-type personalities. They know where they're going. They basically say, hey, I know where I'm going, and follow me. And so they do a great job of that. Brad's installed a great culture. They work hard. If you've seen the pictures from up high a couple of times where I think Plummer the other night was shooting a free throw, and all four of our guys are interlocked with arms around each other while the other team was kind of standing there milling about a little bit. And that just shows you, you know, they talk about family, they talk about how important it is to be a close-knit unit, play for each other, play hard, do your best every game. I think Brad's instilled that in his guys and in the culture, and you can kind of see the results. I could tell when he came in 4 or 5 years ago that this was going to be a good program again. And other coaches I had heard from, when they heard that Brad Underwood was hired, they were like, uh-oh, Illinois is going to be really good in a short amount of time. So I'm not surprised at all by the success they've had. Well, I just think that there have been a lot of people, I mentioned some earlier, Jerry Edwards, Jim Turpin, Lauren Tate, and others that have been instrumental. Mike Hale, Stevie J in town, has been a great friend over the years, even though he had to move across town and be on a different station. So he's been instrumental. My wife Leanne being with me, understanding that when I get home late at night, that's just the way it is with the schedule. So she's been awesome, and my family's been really great to allow me to do this. Really, it's funny because I tell groups all the time, I have a great job because I get to go to every game, I get a great seat, and they pay me to sit in it. And that's a great job to have. I don't feel like I've really worked all these years. I've got a job that I have a lot of fun with, that I enjoy doing, and it's just awesome to come out, you know, when the place is full and the crowd is roaring and the flags are flying and the team's coming out. I still get chills every time I come out to the court as an Illini fan who grew up here, and then being able to sit down and do the games with Dion or Doug or whoever's doing it with me. It's just a real blessing and a real privilege to be able to do it, because I'm an Illini fan at first and a broadcaster second, and that's a great mix, I think, to be the voice of the Illini.